Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Empowering Musicians podcast. I am your host, Michael Manley, and I am very happy to be welcoming Erin Zapcic to the show today. And Erin is a writer, performer, actor, and union organizer who is very key in a current fight of medieval times workers in Southern California to form their own union and get the respect they deserve in their workplace. So, Erin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
You're very welcome. And let's go. Let's start with where you're working now. So, you're working at Medieval Times. What is that like as a worker, and what kind of workers do you have? How many employees, and what's it all about?
So, Medieval Times is a medieval 11th century Spanish medieval themed dinner show. We have 10 castles in the continental United States and Canada, and I currently work at the location in Buena Park, California, which is very close to Disneyland. So we're a very high tourist area, and Knott's Berry Farm as well. And I'm a performer in the show cast. I play the Queen, and I've been with the company for 12 years. So in that time, I have played a number of roles. I started as a wench in the gift shop, and then I became a bar wench, and then I became a princess. And eventually I've done other things like worked in the marketing department. I've worked in administration, and even sold tickets at one point, group sales. And now here in the California castle, I am primarily just in the show cast. Which just means that I come in and I do the show. I play the Queen. She is the front and center sole monarch in the show. And, our typical day-to-day responsibilities include, of course, getting ready for the show and then greeting guests as they come in, taking pictures. We support the retail department in that we perform knighting ceremonies for people who purchase them. And then we play, then we do the show. And so it's fully scripted. It's a 2-hour performance. Lights, sound, costumes, the whole nine. And then after the show, we go out and greet guests and again, take pictures, sign autographs. In terms of the size of the show, so our bargaining unit comprises everyone who's immediately involved in the show. So that's knights, squires, showcast, which is non-combat performers. So all of the speaking roles plus our trumpet players and the stable hands. So our bargaining unit is approximately 50 people. And then, the castle itself is about 200 employees per castle. And, that's that's your servers, that's your retail, that's your bar, any sort of management and, administrative staff. And in addition to our performers union with the American Guild of Variety Artists, 2 other departments within our castles have recently organized as well. So our sound and lighting department is now organized with IATSE Local 504, and our retail department has an election next week with UFCW Local 324.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me listening to this is that the only thing that compares to this in my mind is the circus, where you have people that are working merchandise, you have performers, you also have musicians, and you have animals.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Yeah. To some degree, a theme park or, usually like this, the closest apples to apples comparison would be the Renaissance Fair, just in terms of the actual experience. But in terms of the business structure, the Renaissance Fair operates very differently from what we do.
Yeah. So I'm just going to pretend like I'm just a regular customer. I'm coming to Medieval Times, and, I'm just thinking, well, you're playing a queen. That sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
What a fun job that must be. What's wrong? What is the thing that's leading you all to want to form a union? Like, what are some of the issues that are surfacing?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, wages are a huge concern. We live in Southern California. The cost of living here is approximately $25 an hour. Most of the people in our bargaining unit, or at least over half of the people in our bargaining unit, are making less than $20 an hour. And that's including our stuntmen, the knights in the show that are jumping off of horses, running 25 miles an hour. Most of the guys are making around $18.50 an hour. We also have professional musicians in our show. We have trumpet players that make $16 an hour. And they have not received any kind of like wage increase. Like their wage increases happen when minimum wage increases, pretty much. And you have to be a professional musician. You have to have job experience and talent in order to do your job. Whereas if you walk in right now on the website, on the Medieval Times website, they have cashiers in the gift shop posted. It literally says, no job experience necessary. This is a great first job opportunity. And you can walk in off the street at 16 years old and make more money per hour than our trumpet players that require at least 5 years of experience in order to be able to do their jobs. So wages are a big concern. Safety is another concern. We have, staffing is an issue. Basically, a lot of this sort of came out of the post-COVID wear down, right? So we were closed for a year and a half after during COVID, and when we came back, they kind of expected us to immediately go back to doing the same kind of shows that we were doing before. And we were running with a very lean staff. We had a bunch of nights that didn't come back after COVID, which meant that we were training up a whole new slate of nights to go into the show. And that takes time, like when you first learn your role in the show, you only learn like maybe 1 or 2 fights. So we had a handful of senior guys who knew everything in the show. And then we had a handful of new guys who really only knew 1 or 2 spots in the show. So they couldn't take any of the load off of the senior guys, because it's sort of like Jenga when they, or Tetris, there's a very like sort of delicate dance that comes to scheduling, because you need to make sure that you not only have enough people to do the show, but you have enough people who know how to do every spot in the show to do it. And so these senior guys were then very tired, working 6 days a week, getting hurt. And the clinic that they send these guys to with their workman comp injuries, like there are guys that like got looked at and it was like, oh, just put some ice on it and rest. And he ended up having a torn MCL and having to have surgery, or, people that have surgery and are out for a very long time and are coming back, they kind of like need to get reacclimated. So safety and the health is a big one. And another really key issue that's oh my gosh, is that me?
Hold on.
Oh, okay.
For some reason my phone talks to my computer, and now my even though my phone's on silent, my computer's not on silent. So
I wasn't sure if it was me, because I'm sort of like on call right now with my other job. So I was just want to make sure it wasn't something. So another big concern that has always been a concern for us, but really has sort of emerged as a primary issue for us since we've been on strike, is the care and the treatment of the horses. We have a horse trainer at our castle that uses some pretty arcane methods when it comes to treating and training the horses. And an abused animal is a dangerous animal. These jobs are dangerous enough as it is. And you don't really know how an abused animal is going to react. Like they're like people, they're having a trauma response. And so, these horses will occasionally be erratic and freak out. And we put forth some proposals in our initial collective bargaining agreement to address, the treatment of the horses and to provide for some more humane and like positive reinforcement training. And the company rejected them outright and basically replaced it with one sentence that said the training and care of the horses will be the same at this castle as it is at every other castle. So, so those are our 3 key issues. And that's really what led us to organize in the first place.
And that's really fascinating. And so the New Jersey company is already organized. Is that correct?
Yes, they were the first castle to unionize. They had their election in July of last year. And once their election became public, we moved very quickly to organize within our castle. We collected the requisite number of cards within 5 days, and we filed for our election, or the first step is that you file for what's called voluntary recognition. So we filed for voluntary recognition literally the Monday after New Jersey had their election. So it was New Jersey, and then it was immediately us. And we felt like that sent a really strong message to the company, like, things are not okay. Like, you need to make some real change here. But unfortunately, we've been dealing with massive pushback from the company pretty much since day one.
Interesting. That's really unfortunate, but not atypical, right? Unfortunately.
No.
So a really wonky question. In New Jersey, are the trumpet players being represented by the musicians union, or are they also in AGVA? And how
they're also in AGVA.
Okay. And do they play trumpet all the time, or do they also do acting and other things?
It's primarily, the trumpet players, and here's another issue for them, right? Is that they're sort of treated like stagehands who also play the trumpet. So they do have a lot of downtime because they have like calls that need to happen throughout the show. But then they help us with they bring out the flowers when we throw them out to the knights during the show. They're sort of our liaison between the backstage and on stage, because once the performers in the show, the speaking performers, once we're on stage, we pretty much don't leave. So if anything's happening, if there's any sort of like, it's live theater, we work with animals, like things could go wrong all the time. They're the ones that have like access, and my cat's going to join me now in frame. I apologize. They have access to radios and can, connect us with managers or security, if anything, event staff, if anything is amiss. Yeah.
So for those folks that are watching or listening later, let's talk a little bit about you have an example in New Jersey of folks union organizing. How do you start having conversations with your own colleagues, and what is the process that you went through to actually build your campaign?
Sure. So when there was a Huffington Post article that went live right around this time last year, announcing that New Jersey had filed for an election, and we were always connected to each other, text message, group chats, that kind of thing. And there were a bunch of people that shared that article with me, knowing that I had started my medieval times career in New Jersey, and we're just sort of like, what do you know about this? Can you what can you find out? So I asked around, and I couldn't really find out anything from New Jersey other than what was publicly available. But it became clear to me that there was interest in organizing within the California Castle. And just doing a quick Google search, and I reached out to my father, whose last job before he retired was that he worked for the New Jersey State Fed, AFL-CIO. So I reached out to him, and I was like, hey, I think people might want to do this. I could tell right off the bat that there was a certain element of secrecy involved, and that essentially I'd be putting my job at risk. And so I knew I needed to move very carefully, but I also knew that we would probably have to move very quickly, because with New Jersey organizing, the management was going to be watching us like a hawk. So I got connected to the AGVA office, and Suzanne, who's the executive secretary and treasurer, who's also our direct representative, mentioned that she had also been reached out to by another performer, Jake Bowman, who is now my counterpart. So we, sort of went through the whole process, and I connected with Jake, and we put together a very small group of people that we thought we could trust. We had a meeting with AGVA about getting the cards, and then they mailed them out to me, and I distributed them, and we collected our cards within a matter of days. It was about 5 days to collect the requisite number of cards. And we had to move that quickly, because and I do see I am getting a call right now, a work call. I am so sorry. We had to move that quickly because we knew management was watching us, and we knew people's jobs were going to be at risk. So I became involved because I because Medieval Times is not my full-time job. And I knew that, you know, I was in a unique position to be successful with this, and also wanted to be able to fight for people that I care about.
Great. And so, did you have any conversations? Did you have like organizing conversations with your colleagues when you were in the process of getting the card signed, or?
Jake actually did most of that. He was the boots on the ground person, because he's a knight, and so he was able to be there and have those on the ground conversations. And he, you know, was a presence in the locker room, where I, you know, again, I'm only there once or twice a week doing shows. So I had very few relationships with the Knights prior to any of this starting. And that, honestly, that was something that the company later used against me, because when they were trying to, you know, sort of sow the seeds of discord, is like, you know, like, this person only works 1 day a week. Like, what, like, obviously what does she know about what you guys need? And, you know, she's only doing this for the attention because she's a failed actress, and, you know, all of that stuff. Which, you know, like, I made myself an easy target, and I knew that. I knew going into it that there was going to be a lot of pushback. So having Jake was very helpful, because he could sort of, and, you know, he was the first one to tell you that, like, basically I would take the information that I would receive, give it to him, and he would disseminate it. So, so he just is a really skilled, what is that? Soft skills, like being able to talk to people and do the internal organizing and stuff. And so he's really great with that. And he's very charismatic, and a lot of people like him, obviously. So, so those were the conversations that Jake was having. And, you know, he educated himself on the union as well. And, you know, basically saying, like, listen, the fact that we're taping our boots together, like, we can put that in our contract, like, everything that we want to have addressed. And, you know, that is why AGVA was such a good fit for us, because we create our contract that, you know, addresses our specific needs, even different from what's happening over in the New Jersey castle, because our castle in California is very different. And, you know, we have a volume of shows that is completely different from any other castle in the company. We do more shows than any other castle at Medieval Times. And, you know, we wanted to make sure that we had a contract that reflected that.
Yeah. So the folks in New Jersey, have they reached their first contract agreement yet?
No, they have been bargaining pretty much as long as we have. You know, the company sort of dragged things out with them quite a bit. And, you know, initially with us, our negotiations started off as wage negotiations, which it's not, if anyone is unfamiliar with the process, like, typically you go into a collective bargaining agreement first with your, like, language and different provisions that you're going to put forth, and economics is usually the last thing that you present. But every year we have scheduled annual wage increases, and those happen at the end of the year. Our election was in November, and so before the results of our election were even certified, Medieval Times had reached out to us and said, you know, we're going to offer you the opportunity to bargain for these year-end raises. And I say that, but legally they had to. So we sat down and started wage negotiations way sooner than you typically do in this process. Just by virtue of the fact that we had these annual wage increases coming up. And, you know, throughout our organizing campaign, the company kept promising us, like, listen, with or without the union, you're going to be happy with our wage proposals. And, you know, like, you're going to get big raises this year. We can't tell you how much, but you're going to be happy. And all the other non-union castles got wage increases upwards of 20% this year. When we sat down with the company for our first bargaining session, their initial wage proposal to us was 2%. And that was for Showcast, that 0% for trumpeters. And they did not come with any of the wage proposals for the Knights that we had asked for weeks ago. So weeks prior to that first session. So we knew we were in for an uphill battle right off the bat. and New Jersey was pretty much the same. So they also had to bargain for these year-end raises, but their election was in July. They could have been bargaining this whole time, and they did not make that information available until we had our election, because they didn't want us to know and use that as leverage or as an election talking point. Like, listen, if we vote the union in, we'll be able to bargain for our raises. They didn't want people to know that. So they waited until after our election to get both unions the opportunity to start bargaining for their raises, even though New Jersey could have been bargaining the whole time.
Interesting. And what you mentioned earlier about, the company kind of trying to divide workers and have probably captive audience meetings, this is all part of, the sort of anti-union campaign that's pretty standard in these organizing drives.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you all stand together amidst all of those things and keep your solidarity when you're getting bombarded with these anti-union tactics?
I'm not going to lie. It was pretty stressful. We had a very strong contingent that our minds were not going to be changed. And there were some people who did come over to our side throughout the process. And there were some people that we lost. It was, honestly, I feel like one of the things that I keep coming back to with this company is that they continually make dumb, for lack of a better word, it's just flat out dumb, ego-based decisions. And they can't help but continue to shoot themselves in the foot. The way that they treat us, the way that they speak to us, they're their own worst enemy. And they continued to show their true colors throughout the whole process. They'll put up a good front, and then the cracks start to show. And we have a lot of smart people, a lot of people who could see the forest through the trees, and still recognized that what the company was doing and what the company is capable of if we had voted the union out, because without that union protection, I would not have my job, flat out. They, you can't be fired for organizing, but they can find lots of other ways to fire you. And at will employment is a thing. And my direct manager was fired for supporting the union because he unfortunately did not enjoy union protection. So it became very clear right away. They just can't help themselves. They just can't help themselves. And at the end of the day, there are enough of us who were able to see what was going on to vote in the union. But honestly, it was a nail biter. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Well, and in organizing, one of the things that is clear, I won't say it's easy, because it's never easy and it's never simple. But one of the things that's absolutely consistent is that the anti-union campaign is always the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's always, whether it's Amazon or Starbucks or Medieval Times, you're going to get the same, 15 messages, and you can kind of prepare workers for that early and say, okay, we're going to hear this, we're going to hear this. One of them is always like, well, we can't, if you unionize, we're just going to go out of business. We're not going to be able to afford it. Or we're one big happy family. What's wrong? And you can come to me. Or, all of those messages are standard. So, so when you did the initial card signing, what percentage of cards did you have signed?
We had about, they don't like us to actually give the numbers, but we had what we considered a super majority. Legally, you only need to collect 30% of the bargaining unit to move forward with an election. Most unions don't want to take that risk. So, they want a considerable margin above the 50% mark, so that they, even if there is some attrition, they know that it's going to be, worth it in the end. And so we did. We had what we consider a super majority. of the bargaining unit. And obviously since we've been out on strike, I'm not even entirely sure how many people are in the bargaining unit now, because the company has hired people since we've been on strike and they have not alerted the union, even though they're supposed to. There are people that have quit since we've been on strike. And again, the company has not alerted the union to that. So I'm not entirely sure how many people are in the bargaining unit right now.
So, that's really good information. And, it's always good to have a supermajority, because you have to kind of assume that maybe some people are going to be susceptible to that anti-union campaign. And,
Yeah.
when Obama was in office, there was a move to try to get card recognition for union recognition. Fortunately, that the Democrats didn't push that through when they had some majority in Congress. But the reason why our labor laws in America are the way they are is because the employer wants to have to go to an election, even though you can say we have a supermajority that voted by signing cards. And what that does in America is it just says, okay, well, now you can go to an election. And what that does is it gives the employer time to prepare an anti-campaign. And that's why employers always fight the idea of card recognition. But you all stood together and you sustained that, and you won your recognition. So congrats on your great work.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot. The campaign in New Jersey lasted only about 6 weeks. The company did not contest their bargaining unit, and so they had their election 6 weeks after they filed. But in our campaign, they contested our bargaining units, which meant that it had to go to a hearing scheduled by the National Labor Relations Board, and then the NLRB had to decide about the hearing. And we got put into a pilot program that started with the Trump administration, where the region officer who actually heard the case was not the person who would write the decision. So it got sent to some complete other region to review the case and everything, and then make their decision. So that sat on somebody's desk for 4 months, and in the meantime, the company really dug their heels in and got their claws in people. They identified people that they felt that they could position to lead the anti-union movement. They tried to get us to cancel our election entirely. That was something I was not really prepared for in terms of the anti-union stuff. They put forward this idea that we could withdraw our petition for election and work with the company directly. And if we weren't happy with the results we were seeing in 6 months, we could reinstate our petition for election and use the same cards. And the collecting cards is the hardest part anyway, so that this is putting the whole thing on pause. That's what they kept saying. It's just pausing. All you're doing is pausing for 6 months. Work with us, we can get you the things that you want. And that is a gross misrepresentation of what is actually happening. When you withdraw your petition for election, you are canceling your election, full stop. And yes, your cards are good for a year from the date that you sign them, but the cards have to be independently verified by the National Labor Relations Board. If you submit a second petition for election using the exact same cards, the NLRB is not going to take that, because that could just be the union. That could be a corrupt action by the union, right? They like, oh, we're just gonna refile using these same cards and try to force these guys into a union if they said they didn't want it. And the AGVA, our union, had invested a lot of time and money and resources to getting this off the ground in the first place. So that's essentially like saying, you're dating someone, right? And then you call things off because you want to try and work things out with your ex. And then you come back 6 months later and the things just didn't work out for all the same reasons I thought before. Let's try again, baby. Let's make it work out. It's they may not take you back. So, so there was a lot of risk. And you are vacating the status quo at that point, which means that you lose all of your union protection. So, thankfully, there were enough of us that recognized the danger in that. And well, actually, no, I'm going to walk that back. We ultimately, they collected they collected signatures for a petition, a withdrawal petition that they felt was the majority of the bargaining units. And we made the decision that, the petition was misleading because it literally said on the top of it, I understand that if I'm not happy in 6 months, I can reinstate the petition for election. I was like, that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
So you're signing a lie. B, we knew that the company was providing an illegal amount of resources towards this effort. The closest approximation of what this is what's called the union decertification petition that happens a year after you file for an election. And there is no formal process for withdrawing a petition for election. The NLRB considers that to be a decision, an internal decision between the union and the employees if you decide that you want to cancel an election. And the NLRB is supposed to be neutral, right? So the NLRB, if they consider that an independent or an internal conversation between the union and the employees, they are not going to provide terms and resources and any kind of protocol for making that happen. The woman who was leading the anti-union movement within our bargaining unit insisted that she got this language from the National Labor Relations Board and that she got the language for the petition, and they provided all the guidance and everything for her to do this. And I called the NLRB, and they were like, we would never do that. So we knew that the company was providing access to their attorneys to this person. And, with a union decert petition, the company cannot even provide the paper it's printed on. That is how uninvolved a company legally has to be with a union decert petition. So please tell me how it is possibly legal for a company to provide access to their attorneys to try and get us to withdraw our petition for election. And in the meantime, we also, the person that they sent to us to hold our captive audience meetings, who is an employee of the company at the corporate office, was soliciting, was actively involved in the creation of the petition and was trying to get people to solicit, trying to get people to sign, even though he claimed that he wasn't involved at all. We have reason to believe that. So that's actually going to a hearing. That's a complaint that's been issued by the NLRB against Medieval Times, and the company was offered multiple times to settle and make this right, and the company has refused to settle. So now this is going to a hearing in October to the company's basically getting sued by the NLRB. That's what's happening. So I think I veered way off from the the question there, so I apologize. But that's the sort of union busting that we dealt with.
Yeah, that's a really sort of malicious union busting technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I haven't heard of that one, but what occurs to me is that if somebody were to go down that path and say, okay, well, we can table this and I'll sign this. Like if you don't have a sign, the signing of the recognition card gives you some protections, right? So if you don't have that, they could then fire you. They might fire you anyway, right? But it would be an unfair labor practice.
Yes.
But it's not an unfair labor practice if they fire you if you have no signed card or if the card's invalid. Yeah.
I mean, yes, technically, you don't technically need union protection. My former manager actually just filed a ULP against Medieval Times for his unfair for his dismissal because he supported the union. So that is technically protected activity. And so anyone who's listening, even if you're not in a union, if you support a union and you feel like you're being targeted, harassed, or even lose your job, you can call the NLRB as an individual and file an unfair labor practice against the company, and they will investigate it, and you could potentially get reinstated with back pay. So, but it is a process and it takes time. And so, the companies are willing to take that risk. The bottom line is that over 40% of employers violate federal labor law during organizing campaigns and, any kind of union campaigns in general because they get away with it. And the NLRB is pretty toothless, and to them, it's worth the slap on the wrist to get a union out of there, or to keep a union effort from getting off the ground.
Yeah, that's also true, unfortunately. So you all, you're getting some really non-serious proposals from management, and they're dragging their feet, and then you decide to go on strike. Is that where we are today?
That's where we are today. We've been on strike since February 11th, so over 4 months at this point. I'm not sure whether I mentioned this, before we went live or since we've been on the call, but we got sued by the company about a week before our election, or maybe 2 weeks before our election, for trademark infringement, because we call ourselves Medieval Times Performers United. That's the name of our local, and there is plenty of legal precedent for using your employer's name in your union. We're also not generating any income. They're maintaining that we're causing consumer confusion, that people are giving us money instead of them, and that by calling ourselves Medieval Times Performers United, that implies an endorsement of the company, of our union. So they sued us. We do have an unfair labor practice filed against them for that. We also have a motion to dismiss. These are things that just move at the pace that they move. Yeah. So that is still an outstanding lawsuit. And the company then used that illegal lawsuit to get our TikTok account banned from the platform. We had built an audience there of over 8,200 followers. Wow. And TikTok is a passionate platform, and a lot of social justice warriors in there. And we were very vocal about management's wage proposals to us, and why we unionized, and we had a very passionate following, and they were jumping platforms and going over to Medieval Times' social media and saying you need to treat your workers better, you need to work with the union. By the way, if you use the word union on any of their social media platforms, that's a restricted word, so your comment will not show. Fun fact: if you're going to write anything about a union, make sure you put a 1 in the I, or a 0, or find other ways to say it, because otherwise your comment is immediately hidden.
Is that, I'm sorry, for which platform is that true?
Instagram,
interesting.
So if you look, you can see Medieval Times. If you go to especially the California Castle, you look at a post and it says 96 comments or whatever, and then when you click on it, none of them appear, because they've all been hidden for words that they use filters, and one of their filters is union. I think wages probably also. So at that point, once we had gotten kicked off of TikTok, we knew we needed to take some big drastic action, because they were silencing our voices. They were silencing the voices of our supporters. And so we walked out on a Saturday. Saturday is a triple show day. We did the first show everything was normal, and then we all clocked out and walked out after the first show ahead of the second show of the day. And we've been on strike ever since.
Wow, that must have been a really powerful action to take together.
It was. It's one of those things where the actual moment of it happening was not as dramatic as you might think. We all kind of we were just standing at the clock, and the time clock, clocking out, and then we kind of because people needed to get changed out of their costumes and stuff, and so their managers yelling at us and you're putting us in this terrible position and blah blah blah, and we were just kind of don't care. And it was actually kind of anticlimactic, not this do you hear the people sing moment. And as we all kind of walked out, and then there was sort of this, I had to be on PR duty and send out the press release and post on social media, and Jake sort of corralled the guys and took them separately, to kind of calm them down and breathe for a second. And then maybe about an hour later was when we were fully out with picket signs and the bullhorn and, chanting. And that was honestly, I have done some pretty cool things in my 40 years, and the doing that was probably the coolest thing I've ever done.
That's amazing. That's a great story. And so are other unions supporting you, or other workers supporting you? How is the public reacting to it? And are you having pickets up every day, or how is it all working now?
So we typically picket about 5 days a week. The company has shows 6 days a week. So, we've had to scale back a bit. The reality is we're 4 months in, right? And while we had a strike fund and we raised, over $50,000, which was amazing. We have 30 people out on strike. So, that starts to get stretched very thin. And we've been very good about only the people who really need the money take it. So we were able to make that last for a long time and have a robust strike line for a while. But now, most people have had to get other jobs. So on any given day, we have, 3 or 4 people out versus the 10 or 15 that we had when we first walked out. And but we have gotten a lot of support from the Orange County Labor Federation. We've made some really fantastic friends and allies in the in the labor movement in general. So we have folks who come out and stand with us. And generally speaking, the support from the community at large has been overwhelmingly positive. We do have, some people who feel that their entertainment is more important than our livelihood. That's of course always disappointing to see because, medieval time, we're not an essential service, right? Like we're not postal workers, we're not grocery workers. It is completely optional to come and spend $70 to be entertained for 2 hours. And yet people will say, well, it's my birthday or, it's Father's Day or whatever. We just on Beach Boulevard where our castle is, there's Pirates Dinner Adventure 2 doors down. There's Knott's Berry Farm across the street. There's Disneyland 10 minutes away. Like you coming here is a choice. Even if you didn't know until you showed up that the workers were on strike, you still have a choice. And you can make a different choice and make a better one and support workers. But it's probably one of the biggest things, one of the biggest hurdles that I've encountered is how uneducated people are about labor and its lasting contributions. People will say, like, I'm not nice on the picket line. I'm at the point now. It's like I'm not nice anymore. Like if you want to actually talk to me and find out what the issues are, of course I'll be happy to educate you and whatever. But most of the time I'm standing out there with a sign that says, "If you go inside, you're a bad person," and I stand by that assertion. And people get very upset about that. And I'm like, you know what? Like, if I wasn't right, you wouldn't be upset. On some level what you're doing is wrong, but you've decided that. Your 10-year-old who will understand if you explain it to him, by the way, that his birthday is more important. You've decided that Father's Day is more important. You've decided that your anniversary or date night or whatever is more important than the people who do this show. And that's, people say like, oh, just get another job or, your fight is, somebody literally said to me the other day, your fight is stupid. And I would, and we have like photos of the abuse of horses that's happening on the inside that we hold. And he's like, I used to work on a farm. Horses die all the time. I'm like, this is an entertainment venue. Horses should not die in there. Horses should not be bleeding in there. This is entertainment.
Yeah.
And so the fact that like a lot of people just sort of regard it as like we're just having a temper tantrum, and it's just like you're having a temper tantrum. You are yelling at us, and you are choosing to be here. Go to Pirates, go to Knott's, go to Disneyland. Like, sit at home and watch 2 hours of television. Like you have a choice.
Yeah. It's so unfortunate, but it's so kind of typical of the sort of I'm going to use an oxymoron here. The collective narcissism that we're all suffering from.
Yes.
And it's the same thing of, why should I have to wear a mask? It's like the idea of doing something for the greater good is like really being lost in a lot of people's minds today. And so unfortunately, I can see that conversation like, oh, well, why should I stand with you and not have my son's birthday or whatever, or my daughter's birthday? I mean, it's
my favorite is when people are like, well, it's like, it's my vacation. It's like, if you have paid time off, who do you think got you that? Unions. Right. And they didn't do it by being nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that I guess is where the point I was getting to is that, people like, you should be nicer. And I think there's also, of course, an undercurrent of misogyny there. People don't like a little woman telling them how to think or how to feel. But, it's like, you should be nicer. You get more people over to your cause. And it's like,
yeah,
if you only work 40 hours a week, a union got you that. And they didn't do it by being nice. If your kid's on summer break, a teacher union did that, and they didn't do it by being nice. Like,
yeah. And there's the old saying of, unions, we brought you the weekend, right? Like
Yeah,
people don't realize even in non-union work that they're benefiting from the standards that union workers fought for and in some cases died for.
exactly.
And we're seeing some really surreal rollbacks, right? I mean, in is it Arkansas where Governor Huckabee was like, "Yeah, let's just not have child labor laws. Let's let kids." I mean, this is why we have unions, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really important to highlight that. So how can folks connect with you? I see you've left I handle at MT United CA. Is that the best way to find you on the social medias?
Yeah, on social media, we're MT United CA. That's on every platform except TikTok, obviously. But Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're not terribly active on Facebook because, well, people aren't so nice on Facebook. People like to fight on Facebook, and so Instagram is our biggest platform. Also Twitter, we've gotten a lot of support this week from the WGA, which has been really great. There's also if you go to Instagram, there's a link in our bio that will take you to a landing page where you can sign up for email updates if you want to join us on the strike line. The best way that people can support us is not crossing the picket line. I feel like I've driven this home, and I'm going to say it one more time. Like, you have a choice when it comes to your entertainment. Make a different choice. Don't cross the picket line. And even if you're not in Southern California, we are a high tourist area, so people come from all over to come to Medieval Times. Like, just make other plans, make other birthday plans. The only way this company is going to take us seriously is when we start affecting their bottom line. We know we're having an effect. We just need to have a bigger one. And honestly, people have reached out to us from different states and said, hey, I live in Texas and my birthday's coming up. I was planning to come. Is it crossing the picket line if I go to the Dallas location? And I said, well, technically no, but if you really support us, you'll make other plans. And he was like, you're absolutely right. Solidarity is not a technicality. I stand with you guys. I'm going to make different plans. So, if you're listening and you're not in Southern California, please don't go to Medieval Times, full stop. We're going to make a big announcement when we're back to work. We are so excited to go back to work when we have a contract that addresses our key issues. Because that's what we love doing, right? Like I haven't put on a crown in 4 months. Like, that makes me really sad. And we have all these guys who are adrenaline junkies who like need to be jumping off of horses. And then short of that, spreading the word is also a huge help, because we're fewer than 50 people up against a company with millions of dollars who, like I said, they actively delete comments on social media. They hide people's comments. They have tons of money to spend on advertising, and they've been doing tons of advertising since we've been out on strike, and discounting tickets when they hadn't discounted tickets at all since we've been back from COVID. So we are David versus Goliath, and so awareness and not crossing the picket line. Those are the two ways that people can help us the most.
Great. And at what point, like, has the labor board or either side offered mediation? Has anybody proposed that, or has that been considered?
I don't know enough about the law to know at what point that becomes something that we would ask for. We have not filed charges to say that to claim failure to bargain or anything like that, because they are being very good about doing just enough to make it seem like they're moving the ball down the field, but not actually addressing our key issues. So I do know that the NLRB General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzo is aware of our struggle and is aware of the way Medieval Times has been behaving, and they're also beefing up consequences, fines, penalties for serial offenders. We do have a very pro-labor NLRB right now, which is amazing, and Jennifer Abruzzo is really working hard to give the NLRB some more oomph. She wants to get rid of captive audience meetings entirely. And so, that's a huge thing. And like I said, they are looking to beef up the consequences for companies that are serial offenders, including having to pay all of the attorney fees for the union if they are determined to be serial offenders of the National Labor Relations Act. So in medieval times, we have one complaint issued, and there are a number of complaints that are about to be issued. So and we have over a dozen total ULPs filed against the company in just 1 year between the two castles. I mean, and all of the charges they filed against us have been withdrawn because their charges were found to be without merit. So that speaks to the kind of company that we're up against. And you know, two other bargaining units have been formed within just the California castle since we've been on strike. So that should tell you like what's going on inside.
Wow, that's really powerful. So you have 4 bargaining units total that have won recognition with medieval times, or are in the process of it.
3. So there's our bargaining unit, and then there's sound and lighting with IATSE Local 504, and then the retail department has their election next week for UFCW.
Great. And what about other castles, if that's what we're calling the workplace, outside of Orange County and New Jersey?
We do know that there were other castles that were collecting cards. The momentum there has been very chilled because the company gave them substantial raises, last year, and they've also been very good about rooting out the people that were organizing. There was a union organizer that was fired at one of the other castles. There is a ULP we have filed about that. And so the momentum unfortunately has slowed down, but I think if when we are successful with our strike, that's going to really galvanize the movement.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you were able to share your story here on my podcast. And if you want to connect with Erin, it's Erin Zapcic, Erin Zapcic on social media. And MT United CA is the Medieval Times Performers handle on social media. And so the best thing we can do, if you want to follow these folks on social media, sign any petitions that they have going, and most importantly, consider other options if you until the Medieval Times starts treating its workers better. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Erin. And I look forward to your successful conclusion, and we stand with you, and we will all look forward to eating a turkey leg with our hands once you all receive the fair contract you deserve. Thank you. We can't wait to get back to work. Awesome. Well, thank you for being my guest, and I will see everybody next week. Take care.